The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
There's just no question that the Republicans are latching on to this witch hunt to continue the politicization of what was clearly a tragedy and something that was thoroughly investigated by the Accountability Review Board set up by former Secretary Clinton.
You're listening to Rusty Humphries.
Okay, our good friend Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game movie, the trailer just came out. The movie trailer. I'm putting it on my Facebook page right now. You got to go check it out. I don't know how many times we talked about Ender's Game on this show and talked to Orson Scott Card about it. This is going to be huge. By the way, years ago, before this movie was made, I was talking with Orson Scott Card, and he was saying, you'd be perfect for the role of Colonel Graff. You're kidding, really? Yes, you'd be. I picture somebody just like you. You'd be perfect. He said, there's only one problem. What? Well, now that is my idea, you'll never have a chance. So they did finally get somebody to play that character. It could have been me. They ended up getting, how do I pronounce his name? Harrison Ford? Yeah. They got Harrison Ford. So anyway, go look at the trailer right now. It's on my Facebook page, facebook.com/talk2rusty, and look for the Ender's Game trailer, and you can see Harrison Ford on there. It could have been me. I wonder if they made the right decision or not. I'm trying. Hey, it's our good friend Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma. How you doing, Senator? Welcome back to the Rusty Humphries Show.
Well, I'm good, Rusty. How are you doing? I heard you talk about Harrison Ford, and I want you to know when I did my pilot's Bill of Rights, he came in, a liberal guy from Hollywood, and was a big help to me because he's also a pilot. That's good, isn't it?
It is good. What was that? What was that bill on?
Well, the bill was the Pilot's Bill of Rights. Everyone who's listening to us right now, we probably have a couple of thousand pilots. They know very well what it was. It was to give the pilots access to accusations that are made by the FAA to pilots. It's a huge thing, and it passed. It's less than a year ago now. So
it's a good thing.
Anyway, he was a big help, and it was real funny because he didn't know that I was at that time ranked the most conservative member of the United States Senate, and he is not. He's a far from a conservative. And he said something like, Inhofe and I think alike on all these subjects. He didn't know any better. Anyway, he was a big help.
Well, good. Well, he took my movie role, but that's okay. I'll give it to him.
Well, that's all right.
By the way, today there was something that just got voted on at the Senate Judiciary Committee, and you're not on that committee. That is correct?
No, I'm not.
Okay, but this is a big deal. One of the things they've been talking about this illegal immigration bill was, don't worry, we are going to have the border secure. Period, end of story, before we give any amnesty to anybody. Well, today that was just voted down.
Well, it is. Let me tell you about that, because I love the 8 guys and all that. Anytime I see a gang of anything, a gang of 8, a gang of 6, I'm very skeptical, and I have been of this. In fact, I was down at the border when they first came out with it, and here's the thing that people overlook. It doesn't matter what it looks like today, the product of the Gang of 8. It's going to have to go through Pat Leahy's committee, and you're not going to recognize it anyway by that time. So I wouldn't get too exercised over that.
Okay, well, why? Because when Pat Leahy gets his hands on it, it's going to be, the Mexican Bill of Rights?
Yeah, it might be. I'm just saying that before it goes through the committee process, what they come up with right now isn't all that significant because you won't recognize it later.
Okay, but you don't think this is significant that 6 out of 12 or 6 to 12 that of securing our nation's borders first was voted down? To me, we're done now. The conversation's over.
Well, that could very well be. I'm not on the committee, so I can't really respond to that. But you're right. That's a shocker.
Okay. You were one of the ones that helped facilitate I did an hour-long interview with Senator Reid last week, and you were one.
Oh, you did. I was going to ask you if that ever happened.
Yeah, it did. It made a lot of news. I made a lot of my audience members angry because I wasn't mean to them, but that's okay. There was a couple things he said. Well, go ahead.
You've always been real civil, and I think your audience should know that you and I talked about this some time ago, and you referred to him as an early guest that you had many years ago, and how civil he was, and the fact that you had, and I think there's some family connection too in terms of wives, and so you had said, is there any way he would be willing to come on my show? And I said, I bet he would. I talked to him, he said he would. And, of course, yeah, sure, there are going to be things that you disagree on, but I'm sure you handled that very well, and I'm sorry that I wasn't there listening to it.
Well, that's okay. You've got a lot of things going on. Part of the problem is that we have these cable TV shows where if I disagree with you, I got to point my finger in your face and scream at you at the camera, and that's part of the problem.
Well, that is, and I think in the case when you can sit down and really logically talk these things through, it's much more productive than it is. Now, the reason for our discussion today, of course, is to talk about this issue that should be the issue that's driving the entire nation. It's still being ignored by a lot of the networks, and yet this is a huge, huge deal.
You're talking about Benghazi, correct?
Benghazi. Let me just say one thing, Rusty, because I was severely criticized back when I went on Fox News on November 28th, and I'm going to read you exactly what I said at that time. This is going to go down as the biggest cover-up in history. They all knew it. They were all hoping it would go away. They were hoping it would go beyond the election date, which it did. And now the people are not getting to, and I went on and talked about, of all of the great cover-ups in history, we're talking about the Pentagon Papers, the Iran-Contra, Watergate, and all the rest of them. This, I said back in November 28th on Fox, is going to go down as the most serious, most egregious cover-up in American history. And one of the reasons, obviously, is now everybody knows it, and it ended up killing 4 Americans. Mm-hmm. But just logically, you and I talked about this when we were together in, I guess it was here in Washington on that day, and we talked about the fact that we had, before our committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, we had Brennan when he was up he was the Deputy National Security Advisor. He was up to be the CIA Director, and I asked him the question, and he used the word unequivocal. Now, this was back in February that he said that, because I'd been out on that limb then since November. He said, it's unequivocal. We knew the minute the annex happened, that was the morning after the raid, which lasted all night, that it was a professional terrorist attack that was well thought out with, all the Al-Qaeda connections and all that. He used the word unequivocal. Then on the next day, we had Panetta, who was the Secretary of Defense at that time, and I repeated what he had said, and he said, yes, that's true. So they knew that it was a cover-up at that time, at the time that it happened. And to send Susan Rice out to deliberately lie to the American people is something that's going to go down in history, and it's never going to be forgotten.
Well, Senator James Inhofe is here on the Rusty Humphrey Show. There's a great point that was made earlier today. I just mentioned it on the show before you got on. And, Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make? Well, here's what we know. Hillary Rodham Clinton's spokeswoman, Valerie Nuland, demanded talking points be changed. We know that Hillary Rodham Clinton's friend Susan Rice was tasked with delivering the falsified talking points to the public. We know Hillary Rodham Clinton's chief of staff and lawyer Cheryl Mills attempted to blockade Gregory Hicks from talking about the talking points and how it was false. And number 4, Hillary Rodham Clinton's Department of State demoted Gregory Hicks after he talked about the talking points. So the question is, what difference does it make? It seems to be making a great deal of difference to Hillary Clinton.
And I think that she has gotten by with that type of forceful attitude is something that's not normally accustomed, that you don't hear from women as much as you do men. And she came out so forcefully, and you could tell it was orchestrated at the time that she said it. And people were applauding. All of her liberal friends at that time were applauding. Now people know what difference it makes. What you just now said, those are 4 documented facts. My point is, We didn't have to wait till 8 or 9 months after this was over. We knew at the time that it was a cover-up. My fear was that people would forget about it, and of course that's why I've been kind of rejoicing that they're bringing it up now, even though the networks are not. People need to know how serious this is. To me, people may be starting to use the I word before too long.
Okay, the I word meaning impeachment.
Yeah.
Okay, but you live in the world of the Senate. There's no way they're going to impeach this guy over anything, is there?
No, I understand that. I'm not talking about it now. This is something that could endure to the next after the 2014 election. This is not a short story. This is something that was rediscovered after 8 months, and all of a sudden people realized that the proof that we were looking for at that time was not a documentary that we heard in the last 2 days from the House committee, but it was what we heard behind closed doors that in some without being behind closed doors in our Senate hearings on the confirmation of both Brennan and then Clapper after that, and of course Leon Panetta agreeing with their statements. So this is clearly an orchestrated cover-up, and that coupled with what you have just stated, Susan Rice was picked for that job. She was probably a pretty good pick. She, it might have been the right one to do it, but she didn't get by with it. And I'm sure they rejoiced for a long time thinking that she got by with it, and that would be history.
Senator James Inhofe here on the Rusty Humber Show. Senator, I got a message on my Facebook page from Chris, and he said, can you ask Senator Inhofe why, he writes Barry, but why President Obama has not been asked where he was and what he was doing during the Benghazi attack? He shouldn't have to have a big investigation. He's a stellar president, so I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you. He should also have pictures from his private photographer. Where do you think he was in those hours, and why has he not been asked?
Well, tell your listener, I don't know exactly where he was, but I do know this. The only ones who can ask questions that might get answers are the members of the press when there is a live press conference. As you well know, a lot of those people are weeded out. They want to make sure the right questions are answered, and he is insulated. And that's why you don't get it so much from him. I would tell your friend, our listener, that we don't really need that, because what we do know now was for a fact. They went into the White House. They had the information. Brenner was there. Clapper was there. Panetta was there. And all during this time when they were talking about the facts that we know, somebody was responding, and it was the president. I mean, after all, this was right before the election. If the president at that time thought it would be close enough that there are enough of people who believed that his Middle Eastern policy was a failure, that could cost him the election. And so they didn't want this to come out at that time. Purely, by definition, a cover-up.
Senator James Inhofe on the Rusty Humber Show. When you say that you cannot ask the president, is it? I'm trying to think of when a president has been brought before Congress to ask questions. That just doesn't happen, does it?
It just doesn't happen. No, it doesn't. And we send letters all the time, and we get responses from other people. Of course, the president's not going to respond to these things, and we know that. But when you have the three people who are the closest to him, and then having the testimony as they have now testified, and they did way back 8 months ago. So what we got now is not that new. It was a great job by different members of that committee in the House coming out and bringing it forward and getting it on public record. But we had actually had the testimony of Brenner and Clapper and Panetta months and months ago. So that's why I made the statement back on November 28th that it's going to go down in history as the greatest cover-up in American history.
All right, one more thing, and I'll let you go, Senator James Inhofe, and that is, you believe that DHS is buying up ammunition to dry up the supply in the country?
Well, I'm glad you're talking about that, Rusty. Because, and I know you have been. It was Frank Lucas. He's a Republican, a member of the House from Oklahoma. He and I introduced the bill that would say that we set guidelines. We say, with the exception of the Department of Defense, no agency that buys ammunition for firearms will have more on hand than that agency had in the average years of the 8 years prior to Barack Obama. Now, when you stop and think about Obama and Biden and their dismal failure to take away guns, what's the next thing they can do? Well, if they're going to have the guns, we can take away ammo. And I have no reason in my in my own belief, I think that is what was happening. So we hope to get a vote on this and get this out, because we have clearly won or are winning the fight on, and I think they're trying to abandon it now on the gun control.
Now, see, I agree with you, but I guess my question is, do you believe the government is trying to buy up our ammunition supply?
Yeah, the only thing you have to ask is why. What's the motivation of this? What could possibly be the motivation for all of a sudden you have a surge in the purchasing of ammunition? And the only answer to that is there's a deliberate effort to get them out of circulation. This is what I believe. And obviously, to me, it's logical.
Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma. It's always a pleasure, my friend, and keep up the work out there. We need you.
Yeah, I'll do it, Rusty.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.